My parents dumped me at 14 for being broken, now they're begging for my inheritance to save their golden child. When I was little, I was diagnosed with epilepsy at a pretty early age. Unfortunately, my parents weren't exactly the best equipped emotionally or mentally to handle something like that. They started treating me like I was some sort of damaged child they didn't know how to handle. I must have been about 6 years old when I first picked up on how differently they treated me compared to my older brother. He was 3 years older than me and, honestly, they gave him way more love and patience than I ever got. I guess it was easier for them since he didn't have any health issues like I did. And as if the epilepsy wasn't already enough, things got worse when I was diagnosed with dyslexia and severe ADHD around the age of 8. At that point, I became a full-time challenge for them. Now, I get that raising a kid with special needs isn't easy, but they were the ones who decided to have a child in the first place. That responsibility was on them. But it felt like they just assumed, well, our first son turned out healthy, so this one will too. And when that didn't happen, they acted like I was some kind of mistake they were stuck with. They never came out and said it, but they made me feel like I was a burden, like they were stuck tolerating me because they had no other choice. I didn't have the kind of childhood you'd call normal or happy. And it wasn't just because of the medical stuff, it was mostly because of how my parents treated me. Honestly, most of the pain I remember from growing up had less to do with my actual conditions and way more to do with how they responded to them. They made me feel like an outsider in my own family. Like I didn't belong. Like I was some unwanted guest they couldn't wait to get rid of. They'd tiptoe around me like I was a ticking time bomb. The atmosphere would completely change the second I entered a room. It's like someone flipped a switch and sucked all the air out of it. And this wasn't when I was a teenager, it started when I was just a little kid, under 10 years old. As I got older, things only got worse. I was emotionally fragile already, and living in a house where I constantly felt unwanted started to take a toll on me. By the time I hit my teenage years, I just couldn't take it anymore. I started acting out, rebelling, skipping schoolwork, failing classes on purpose, because I was angry. Deep down, I just wanted someone to notice how miserable I was. I became defiant, rude, and distant from everyone, even my friends. I knew I wasn't handling things the right way, but I didn't know how else to get my parents' attention. And even then, it didn't really work. When the school called them in because I'd gotten into trouble, they'd just sigh and look disappointed, but they wouldn't say a word to me about it. Not a scolding, not a lecture, nothing. It was like they didn't even care. I tried throwing tantrums at home just to get a reaction out of them. But all they did was ignore me, or worse, talk about me like I wasn't even there. I could hear them saying things like, "She's having one of her fits again," while rolling their eyes and telling me to act normal. That was the extent of their involvement, judgment, and dismissal. And it broke my heart. Then when I was 14, I went full meltdown. One day I brought a pack of cigarettes to school and actually lit one right there in the middle of class. When the teacher told me to stop and ordered me to leave, I flipped him off. That incident was the tipping point. I'd already been building a reputation as a troublemaker, but my parents had always told the school I wasn't normal, like that somehow excused everything. But this time, it was too far, even for them. I got expelled. And that was the first time I saw my parents truly furious. They let me have it, really let me have it. The things they said that day? I don't think I'll ever forget them. I'd always felt like they regretted having me, but that was the day they said it out loud. They told me straight up that they wished they'd never gone through with the pregnancy. That if they'd known I'd turn out like this, they would have ended it right then and there. They called me a burden, said their lives were better when they just had one kid. And they made it clear they were done with me. They grounded me for a week. But it wasn't your average punishment. They locked me in my bedroom like I was some sort of prisoner. I was only allowed out to use the bathroom, and they brought my meals up on a tray like I wasn't even part of the family anymore. I couldn't talk to anyone. Couldn't go anywhere. It was like solitary confinement, but worse, because it was my own parents doing it. And yeah, I'd messed up. But I was still a kid, their kid. And the way I see it, they failed me long before I ever failed them. I'm not pretending I was easy to raise. I had a lot going on. But that's the job, you don't get to pick and choose only the convenient parts of being a parent. If they weren't ready for that, they shouldn't have had another child. After that week, I finally understood what they meant when they said I was out of the family. One morning, they told me to pack my things and get in the car. I just sat there, stunned, while my mom and brother loaded up my stuff. An hour later, we were on the road. I started recognizing the route pretty quickly. We were headed to my grandma's house. My dad's mom. I figured maybe they were just sending me there for a bit so I could get myself together. I knew grandma was strict, but she'd always treated me better than my own parents did. So I wasn't too worried. But once we arrived, it hit me. This wasn't temporary. They were leaving me there. They'd spent that entire week convincing her to take me in, to raise me, because they were done. They were giving up on me for good. My parents brought all my bags to her front door, left them there, and told me to carry them inside. Once everything was unloaded at my grandma's house, my parents looked me in the eye and told me flat out this was my new home now. They said they didn't want any contact with me going forward, especially not after what I had done. According to them, I had gone out of my way to destroy their reputation, and now I'd finally crossed a line I couldn't come back from. Standing there on the doorstep, I tried to hold myself together, but I broke down and begged them not to do this. As messed up as things had been, I still wanted to be part of their lives. I was only 14, and no matter how bad it got, I still had that desperate, childlike hope that maybe one day they'd want me back. But it was clear they were done. I also started to worry about whether my grandma could really take care of me. She was in her 60s, getting older, and I knew it hadn't been an easy decision for her. It had taken her a full week to agree to this arrangement, and I had a feeling it wasn't because she was thrilled about it. She loved me, I didn't doubt that, but I wasn't sure if she wanted to raise me. I felt like I was just being passed along, first a burden to my parents, and now possibly one to her. I didn't want to disappoint her, especially since she'd always encouraged me, even when she was disappointed in how I was behaving. Whenever I visited her, she'd try to build me up. She used to tell me that I was stronger than I believed, and that my parents might come around if I gave them a reason to. That's partly why I didn't want to live with her. I was afraid she'd start to resent me too. And if I lost her, I'd have no one left. But even after I begged, my parents didn't budge. Right in front of me, they told my grandma they were finished with me. They didn't want to hear anything about me again, didn't want to deal with the freak living under their roof. That word, freak, hit me like a punch in the stomach. I'd heard it at school from the cruel kids, and I'd built up walls to block it out. But hearing it come from my own parents? That was a different kind of pain entirely. It made me realize something I probably always knew deep down. My parents were the real bullies in my life. Not the kids at school. Not the teachers who didn't get me. Them. And in that moment, something shifted inside me. As painful as it was, I suddenly felt like they were doing me a favor by leaving me there. They didn't love me, and maybe they never had. No matter what I did, I was never going to be their real child, not like my brother. So I stopped pleading. I let go. I accepted that I was staying with my grandma now. And in my head, I made a decision I was going to do better. Not for them, but for me. And for her. Because she deserved better than a broken kid, and I deserved better than the people who gave up on me. After my parents left, my grandma and I sat down and had the kind of conversation we probably should have had a long time ago. She was honest, told me that while she loved me deeply, she hadn't been ready to take me in. She had her own worries and fears. My dad had told her all about my behavior, and at her age, she didn't know if she could manage someone who was going through so much. She said she understood that I was struggling, but she wasn't sure if she could give me the right environment to heal and grow. That's why she hesitated at first. It wasn't about not loving me, but about whether she had the strength to step in. But after hearing that my dad had grounded me for a week by locking me in a room like some kind of criminal, she realized she couldn't stay on the sidelines any longer. That was the moment she decided he wasn't fit to be raising me. She even apologized for not stepping in sooner, but she was a widow and didn't have much to offer materially. She just wasn't sure if she could give me what I needed. But after seeing how bad things had gotten, she told me she wanted to try. She wanted us to start fresh, just the two of us. She said this was a new beginning and that she wanted to do right by me, unlike my parents. I took that to heart. I told her I was sorry for everything I'd put her through and that I forgave her for not stepping in earlier, even though I knew she had her own reasons. We agreed to put the past behind us and move forward, together. And I meant it. I'll never stop being grateful to my grandma for what she did. I truly believe I wouldn't be the person I am today without her stepping in when no one else would. That was the day everything changed for me. After I moved in, I made a real effort to turn my life around. I started putting my best foot forward, and she did everything she could to support me. She got me tutors to help me catch up in school, enrolled me in a private academy, and made sure every teacher there knew that I had specific learning needs that needed to be addressed. Unlike my parents, she didn't use my diagnoses as an excuse to write me off, she used them as a reason to fight for the support I needed. And it worked. I started doing better in school, built confidence, and eventually graduated with solid grades. I even made it to college, something I never thought would be possible for me. And all of that was because of her. My parents still came around to visit her once in a while, but they never saw me. I made sure of that. Every time they planned a visit, I'd leave the house and only return after they were gone. They didn't seem to care, and honestly, neither did I. That continued for a few years until one day, my grandma had enough. She got into a massive fight with them. She told them straight up that they were horrible parents for never even trying to speak to me again, especially now that I was doing well and proving them wrong. But they wouldn't admit to any of it. No apologies. No accountability. They just kept pretending they'd done everything right and that I had been the problem all along. They called me a rotten apple and a freak one more time, and my grandma snapped. She told them never to come back. And they didn't. Their pride was more important than their child. They couldn't stand to admit they were wrong about me, even when I was proof that they were. After that fight, my grandma and I cut off all contact with them. For nearly 10 years, we pretended they didn't exist. And honestly, life was better that way. Over the years, I achieved a lot, hit milestones I never thought I would, but I never once heard from my parents. And they never reached out to me either. I wasn't hiding. I had social media. I never blocked them. They just chose silence. Chose to pretend I didn't exist. That is, until recently. A couple of months ago, my grandmother passed away. Losing her was absolutely devastating. She was the one person in my life who always had my back, no matter what. Even though we hadn't lived together for a while, ever since I left for college and later moved into my own place, she was still my emotional anchor. My rock. Life without her has felt strange, unsteady. I was still grieving when my parents finally decided to show up. And not even 6 months after she passed, they were already at my door. They weren't there to offer comfort or reconnect. No, they came to ask for money. Specifically, they wanted me to share my inheritance. Apparently, my perfect and healthy older brother hadn't turned out to be the success story they had banked on. And now he'd made such a mess of his life that they needed help cleaning it up. They showed up without him, which surprised me. Anytime they had visited anyone in the past, he was always right there with them. I assumed naively that maybe they had come to apologize. Maybe they had finally decided to make things right. But after some awkward small talk and a few half-hearted condolences about grandma, they cut straight to the chase. They told me my brother had developed a drug problem during college. And now, it had gotten bad enough that it was affecting his ability to hold down a job. They tried to minimize it like it wasn't that serious, but from what they shared, it sounded pretty severe. Now they needed money to get him into rehab. I asked why he couldn't go to a public, low-cost treatment center. They admitted they'd tried that, but it apparently wasn't good enough. He needed a residential program, the kind that costs a small fortune. I don't know much about rehab, I've never known anyone who went, but I do know those programs can be pricey. Still, it's not like they hadn't seen this coming. And frankly, I wasn't their emergency fund. I have a solid job now. I'm financially stable. And thanks to my grandmother, who was very wise with her money after my grandfather passed, I inherited a decent amount. She made smart investments and managed everything carefully. That money was her legacy, and now it's part of my future. The bitter part is, my parents knew she had money. And still, they were too proud to ever apologize or reconnect with her, not even at the end. They gambled on my brother's success and ignored the only person who supported me. But I didn't lash out. I kept calm and told them I was open to helping them. I was even willing to provide the money if they met one condition. I told them that if they wanted my help, they needed to publicly admit everything they had done. Every cruel word. Every moment of neglect. The way they treated me growing up and the way they treated my grandmother too. I wanted them to finally own it. For years, we kept quiet. Grandma didn't want family drama, so we lived in peace, far away from all the mess. But now that they had the nerve to come ask for a slice of the inheritance, now that they needed me after a full decade of silence, they could at least be honest about what they'd done. And I didn't feel bad asking them to do it. Their reaction was immediate. Their faces fell. They tried bargaining with me, said I was being selfish and emotionally cold. But I stood firm. This was my one condition. I told them they could either accept it or walk away. It wasn't about revenge, I made that clear. I wasn't trying to punish my brother. I had nothing against him anymore. But I wasn't going to pretend like our past never happened just because they were desperate now. They had hurt me. Deeply. And they had hurt my grandmother too. If they wanted her money, they had to acknowledge how they treated the people who cared about them the most. Simple as that. They didn't take it well. They started throwing accusations, called me heartless, told me I lacked compassion. But I reminded them that they shouldn't have expected anything from me in the first place. We hadn't spoken in 10 years. And now that they needed something, they suddenly remembered I existed? They left after that. Stormed off after more crying and name-calling. But I didn't cave. Since then, they've been trying to change my mind. Reaching out again. Saying my brother's condition is serious and that he needs help urgently. And while I do understand the gravity of the situation, I don't understand why they think I owe them anything. They never helped me. They never even checked on us, not once. If I hadn't reached out to the extended family when Grandma passed, they probably wouldn't have even known she died. So now I'm stuck wondering, am I wrong for drawing this line? Because all I'm asking is that they tell the truth. Say it out loud. Acknowledge the pain they caused. And until they do, I'm not handing over a dime. Update: thank you to everyone who commented on my original post. I'm doing okay, truly, thank you for asking. Losing my grandma has been incredibly hard, but she lived a full life, and I know she's finally at peace now. She passed without regret, and I carry her strength with me every single day. Thank you again to everyone who reached out with kind words and condolences. It really meant a lot. Now, back to what's been going on with my parents. Unfortunately, they're still trying to get to me, this time online. I've told them, clearly and firmly, that unless they agree to my one condition, publicly owning up to the way they treated me and my grandmother, they can forget about ever seeing a cent of the inheritance. I know for a fact that my grandmother left everything to me in her will. And I'm sure they know it too, especially since the lawyer copied everyone on the email. So now all they can do is sit in their own regret and watch from the sidelines, knowing they blew their chances. It's been a week since I last heard from them directly, and when they realized their pleading wasn't working, they switched tactics. They started sending me pictures of my brother. He looks rough. The kind of rough that makes your stomach drop. He's clearly struggling, and in every photo they send, they remind me that this is the person who needs my help. But all I can think is, where were you when I looked like that? Where was this compassion when I was the kid in trouble? When I needed someone to pull me out of my spiral, it was only my grandmother who showed up. Not them. They threw me away, and I was just lucky someone caught me before I completely broke. So yeah, I feel awful for my brother. But I can't bring myself to help the people who tossed me aside like trash, unless they finally admit what they did. And it has to be public. Because after all these years of hiding the truth to keep the peace, I'm done pretending. If they want to keep clinging to their pride, that's fine. But if they want help, they're going to have to let that pride go. This isn't about money for me, it's about forcing them to face the reality they tried to rewrite for years. I want to see what matters more to them, their reputation or their son. Update 2: it's been 10 days since I last spoke to them, and I'd already stopped replying to their messages. But this afternoon, they showed up at my door again, this time with my brother. It was awful. I told them immediately that what they were doing was completely out of line. Showing up uninvited, using my brother like some kind of emotional leverage, it only made things worse. I told them this kind of behavior would guarantee they'd never get anything from me. Not because I didn't care about my brother, but because I couldn't support what they were doing to him either. I asked them to leave. They refused at first, saying they wouldn't move until I promised I'd help. I warned them that if they didn't leave, I'd call the police. And honestly, with the way my brother looked, that wouldn't have ended well for them. That threat finally scared them off. But before they left, my dad turned to me and said that my grandmother and I were the most selfish people on earth. Yeah. Selfish. Coming from the same man who dumped me on his mother's doorstep because I wasn't the perfect, neurotypical kid he wanted. If my grandma and I are selfish, then I don't even think there's a word strong enough to describe what they are. Update 3: hey, it's been a while since I posted here. Life got really busy, and I kind of forgot to check in. But it's been almost 2 months since that last incident, and a lot has changed. First off, I moved. I'm in a better apartment now, in a completely new neighborhood, and most importantly, my parents don't know where I live. I've blocked them on every platform, and I've made it very clear to every single relative that no one is to give out my address. Last time, someone in the family must have cracked and gave them my location because their son was suffering. That's how they tracked me down. Not this time. I've locked it down. After that last visit, when my father called me selfish again, I just snapped. I blocked them both. No more open lines. No more drama. I couldn't do it anymore. They've made it perfectly clear, their pride will always come first. Even when it comes to the son they supposedly love so much. I mean, I get it, they never wanted me. I wasn't the golden child with the clean record and shiny future. I had dyslexia, ADHD, and more problems than they were willing to deal with. But my brother? He was their favorite, their perfect child. And they still couldn't swallow their egos enough to help him. All I asked was for them to say the truth out loud. And even though most of the family already knew what really happened between us, they still couldn't admit it. Because in their world, they're the victims. They never did anything wrong. They've never been anything but good parents who had a difficult kid. Well, they can keep living in that fantasy. I'll keep my inheritance, and my peace. Fair enough.